There are some childhood memories that slowly fade with time, and then there are others that refuse to let go. They remain frozen in your mind, replaying with terrifying clarity no matter how many years pass. For one young boy growing up on a quiet peninsula in Norway, life seemed almost perfect. His home sat near a peaceful beach, hidden behind a narrow driveway where very few visitors ever appeared unexpectedly. The only room facing that lonely path was his bedroom, a place that always felt safe until one cold evening changed everything. At only 9 years old, he had no idea that ordinary nights could suddenly become nightmares, or that pure evil could be standing only inches away without making a sound. It was early evening during the colder months, when darkness settled long before bedtime. While his mother prepared for guests, she asked him to continue watching television in his bedroom. He grabbed a few snacks and walked inside, noticing how unusually cold the room felt before switching on the heater. As he stepped back toward the living room to grab some candy, an overwhelming feeling stopped him in his tracks. It wasn't something he saw or heard, it was instinct. A heavy sensation settled over him, convincing him that unseen eyes were following every movement. He quickly turned toward the window, but there was nothing there. Feeling embarrassed by his own imagination, he shook it off and returned with his candy, believing the strange feeling would disappear. The moment he entered his bedroom again, something immediately felt wrong. His window, which he clearly remembered being closed, was now slightly open. Confused, he assumed his mother must have cracked it open for fresh air. Before he could think any further, a faint scratching sound drifted through the silence. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, slow, careful, almost patient. Every muscle in his body froze as the sound grew closer, and then he looked toward the glass. Staring directly back at him was the face of a complete stranger, pressed tightly against the window. The man had cupped his hands around his eyes to block the reflection, desperately trying to see inside. For what felt like forever, neither of them moved. The boy couldn't scream, couldn't run, couldn't even breathe properly. The man's expression was empty, almost lifeless, with dark circles hanging beneath exhausted eyes. Then, without warning, his eyes widened unnaturally, as if he had finally spotted exactly what he wanted. That terrifying expression shattered the child's silence. Gathering every ounce of courage he had, he screamed for his mother. The stranger instantly stepped back and vanished into the darkness, disappearing before anyone else could see him. Still shaking, the boy rushed to tell his mother that someone had been staring through his bedroom window. Before she could fully understand what had happened, the doorbell suddenly rang. She walked toward the entrance while quietly telling her son to stay where he was. From the hallway, he could hear muffled voices, but couldn't make out the conversation. A few moments later, his mother returned, looking strangely pale, refusing to explain who had been outside. Although the guests eventually arrived and the evening continued, an invisible layer of fear settled over the house that never truly disappeared. Months later, the truth surfaced in the most horrifying way imaginable. Police arrested a local man after neighbors complained about a sickening odor coming from his apartment. When officers searched the property, they discovered the decomposing body of a 13-year-old girl hidden inside the attic. Investigators revealed she had disappeared only days earlier, after being seen inside her own bedroom. The child's family had searched desperately, never realizing she had already become the victim of a monster living among them. When the young boy saw the man's photograph after the arrest, his blood ran cold. It was the exact same face that had stared through his bedroom window. Years passed before his mother finally confessed what had happened at the front door that night. The man had calmly claimed he was delivering food and wanted to confirm the address. But living in such a small community, she immediately recognized him from a nearby vegetable shop and knew he was lying. Nobody in the house had ordered anything. Without giving him another chance to speak, she shut the conversation down and sent him away as quickly as possible. At the time, she didn't want to frighten her son, but deep inside, she knew something about the stranger felt dangerously wrong. As an adult, the survivor often looks back on that evening with mixed emotions. Gratitude fills him because he escaped unharmed, yet another emotion quietly follows him wherever he goes. He sometimes wonders if fate simply chose a different victim. If that stranger hadn't been interrupted, would he have become another missing child whose story ended in tragedy? It is a painful question with no answer, one that reminds us how a single scream, a mother's instinct, and a few seconds of timing can separate survival from unimaginable horror. Stories like this force us to confront a terrifying reality. Monsters rarely look like monsters. They blend into ordinary neighborhoods, smile at familiar faces, work everyday jobs, and patiently wait for moments when no one is watching. The greatest danger isn't always hidden in abandoned buildings or dark forests. It can stand outside a child's bedroom window pretending to be just another stranger passing through. Sometimes the only warning we receive is an uneasy feeling that we struggle to explain until it's almost too late. That quiet Norwegian home eventually became nothing more than a memory after the family moved away, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. But some scars never disappear, no matter how much distance or time separates us from the place where they were created. Even today, whenever the survivor remembers that frozen face staring through the glass, he realizes how incredibly close he came to becoming another true crime headline. And perhaps the most chilling part of all is knowing that if he hadn't found the courage to call for his mother at that exact moment, this story might never have been told. Amanda had spent weeks searching for an affordable place to live, freshly starting a new chapter in life. She believed finding a female roommate would make the transition easier. One evening, she stumbled across an online advertisement offering a surprisingly cheap room in a quiet neighborhood. The listing seemed believable, enough a young college student looking for another woman to share the house. Although the advertisement contained only a single photo of the property's exterior, Amanda convinced herself that plenty of people simply weren't good at posting rental listings. After exchanging a few emails, she agreed to visit the house later that evening, unaware that she was walking toward one of the most terrifying moments of her life. When she arrived, the first thing she noticed was a handwritten note taped to the front door, asking visitors to use the back entrance because the front door was supposedly broken. It felt unusual, but not alarming enough to leave. As she walked around the house, an older man answered the back door instead of the young woman she had expected. Smiling politely, he introduced himself as the landlord and claimed the tenant was working late, asking him to show the property in her place. His explanations sounded reasonable, but something deep inside Amanda whispered that the situation wasn't quite right. The house looked strangely lifeless. Dust covered the windows, weeds surrounded the yard, and room after room stood completely empty. There was almost no furniture, no personal belongings, and no sign that anyone actually lived there. The man hurried Amanda through each room, growing impatient whenever she paused to look around. Then she noticed one bedroom remained locked. When she asked about it, he quickly replied that it belonged to the tenant and insisted on respecting her privacy. His answer only made the silence inside the house feel heavier. Just as Amanda politely thanked him and prepared to leave, the landlord suddenly smiled and mentioned there was one last area she hadn't seen: the basement. He opened the basement door, revealing nothing but complete darkness below. Standing aside, he motioned toward the stairs and calmly said, "Ladies first." Every instinct inside Amanda screamed that something was terribly wrong. The darkness below didn't feel like part of a house anymore. It felt like a trap waiting to close behind her. At that exact moment, Amanda's phone vibrated with a text message. Thinking faster than she ever had before, she pretended it was a phone call from someone waiting outside, loud enough for the landlord to hear. She cheerfully announced that her friend had just arrived and needed help finding the house. Without giving the man time to respond, she stepped around him, walked through the back door, and kept moving as naturally as possible until she reached the yard. The second she was outside, her calm expression vanished. She sprinted to her car, locked the doors, and drove away without looking back. Her heart pounded so violently that every passing vehicle made her fear she was being followed. Once she reached home, she told her family everything that had happened before contacting the police. Officers immediately investigated the address, but by then the online advertisement had already disappeared, leaving behind only unanswered questions and the frightening possibility that she had escaped something unimaginably worse. Police soon uncovered a disturbing truth. The property hadn't been occupied by a young college student at all. In fact, the house had been abandoned after foreclosure months earlier. The man Amanda met wasn't a landlord. He had been secretly living inside the empty building. The locked bedroom contained filthy blankets, spoiled food, and evidence that someone had been staying there for quite some time. Every discovery made investigators more convinced that Amanda's instincts had saved her life. The basement was even more chilling. Halfway down the staircase, officers discovered a nearly invisible fishing line stretched across the steps at shin level. capable of making someone fall into the darkness below. Waiting at the bottom were old blankets, rolls of tape, and homemade objects that served no innocent purpose. Investigators couldn't prove exactly what the man intended, but Amanda never needed confirmation. She already knew the terrifying truth the moment she was invited into that basement. She had been standing only seconds away from becoming another missing persons case. Not every true crime story ends with flashing police lights or dramatic arrests. Sometimes the only evidence left behind is a survivor's memory and the overwhelming feeling that fate offered them one final chance to escape. Amanda never returned to that house, but the experience changed the way she viewed strangers forever. She often wondered what might have happened if her phone hadn't vibrated at precisely the right moment, or if she had ignored the uneasy feeling telling her to leave. Some questions are too frightening to answer, and perhaps they're better left that way. Both of these stories share the same terrifying lesson. Evil doesn't always announce itself with violence or threats. Sometimes it hides behind polite smiles, believable excuses, and ordinary conversations that slowly lure victims into danger. Whether it was a man staring through a child's bedroom window, or a fake landlord inviting a young woman into a dark basement, survival came down to one thing: listening to instinct. Because sometimes, that quiet voice warning you that something feels wrong isn't fear at all. It's the reason you're still alive today.